Page 159 of Towns and Schools and Sermons, Chapter 34. At first, the New England settlers built their homes behind high fences called stockades. They were fearful of the unknown, of Indians and animals. Soon they began spreading out beyond the fences into small towns with names like Greenfield, Springfield, and Longmeadow. The names describe the land. Many of those early settlements were just a row of houses strung alongside abandoned Indian fields that the English settlers found and took. Sometimes they lived with Indians as neighbors, although their domesticated animals made that difficult. The Native Americans hunted animals. They had no horses, cows, sheep, or hogs. The Indians soon discovered that those English grazing animals could destroy their cornfields. In 1653, the people of the town of New Haven agreed to work for 60 days to build fences around fields planted by neighboring Indians. New England's courts offered colonists to pay the Indians for damages done to their fields by wandering animals. As the colonists began to prosper, they built towns in America that were something like the villages they left behind in Europe. They were compact, easy to defend, and friendly. At the top of page 160. Castles and manor houses dominated European towns. In New England's villages, it was the meeting house that stood out. The meeting house was used as a church, a town hall, and a social center. It was usually placed at one end of a big field that was called a common, because everyone used it in common. Sometimes, where sheep chewed the field's grass and kept it short and green, the common was called a green. Houses were built around the green. The houses nearest the meeting house belonged to the most important people in town, the minister and the church leaders. Many villages had a stream. The tumbling water of the stream turned a big wheel, and that provided power for the mills where wood was sawed and wheat ground into flour. As the town grew, other buildings were added. A general store, a blacksmith shop, a furniture maker's shop, a candle maker's. If the town was large enough, there might be an inn. Almost always there was a school. The Puritans cared about schooling. By 1636, they had founded Harvard College. It was amazing that they had a college so soon after they arrived, although Harvard did get off to a rocky start. The first teacher beat his students, fed them spoiled meat, and ran off with college money. Then they got a college president, Henry Dunster, at the top of page 161. He was so good that students began coming to study with him from Virginia and Bermuda and even England itself. Of course, they were all Puritans. Because of their religion, Puritans weren't allowed to attend college in England. That was one reason it was so important to have Harvard succeed. To do that, it had to have a supply of students. So in 1642, the Massachusetts Bay Colony passed a law saying that parents must teach their children to read. The Puritans wanted everyone to be able to read the Bible. Let me say that again. The Puritans wanted everyone to be able to read the Bible, even those who weren't going to Harvard. So the next thing they did was pass a law that said, "It is therefore ordered that every township in this jurisdiction, after the Lord has increased its number to 50 householders, shall then forthwith appoint one within their town to teach all such children as shall resort to him to write and read, whose wages shall be paid either by the parents or masters of such children, or by the inhabitants in general." Top of page 162. In plain English, that means every town with 50 or more families must have a school teacher. Do you see something unusual in that law? Read that bit at the end. Shall be paid by the inhabitants in general. Do you know what that means? It means that everyone in the town has to pay for the education of the children, not just the parents. That is what public education is all about. It guarantees that every child, not just those with wealthy parents, can go to school. In America, it all began with that school law in 1647. I know what you're thinking. Why did they have to go and do it? Who needs school anyways? But you don't really mean it. It isn't fun to be ignorant. In the 17th century, much teaching was done by parents or in church, or if you were an apprentice, by your master. But the Puritans could see that sometimes that wasn't good enough. Some parents just weren't good teachers, even though many Puritans were highly educated themselves. The Puritans thought it important that everyone read the Bible. In Boston and the larger towns, some children were actually taught to read the Bible in its original languages. So little Puritan boys and girls of 6 and 7 learned to read Latin and Greek, and a few learned Hebrew too. That sounds hard, and it was, but learning languages is good training for the mind. Many of this nation's greatest thinkers came from Puritan stock. Page 163. Try and take yourself back to Puritan times and see what you think of Sunday church going. Those Puritan ministers gave sermons that lasted for hours and hours. Sometimes there was an intermission for lunch, and then everyone went back to hear more. There was no heat in the meeting house, and New England can get very cold. People brought warming boxes with hot coals in them to keep their feet from freezing. Sometimes they brought their dogs to church for the same reason. A church official held a tickling rod to wake up anybody who looked as if he might be falling asleep. The dog whipper took out dogs who barked. If you were a troublemaker and wiggled and made noise, you could get locked up in the town stocks. You'd have to sit there with your hands and feet stuck into a wooden contraption, and everyone would make fun of you. We know you wouldn't like that kind of life, but maybe things weren't so bad for the Puritan boys and girls. Maybe some of them even looked forward to the sermons. Remember, in Puritan Massachusetts, there were no movies and no TVs. At first, there were no newspapers, no magazines, and only a few books. The Puritans were intelligent people who could read and think well. Maybe that will help you understand why everyone tried to listen to the weekly sermon and why Puritans sometimes spent all week talking about it.